Insert joke here. No? We can fix it in post.
All right. So at the end, we'll just...
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. After we've gone through all of the booze, then we'll have jokes. We'll just loop that back to the beginning. We'll make it into a YouTube short. Bob's your uncle.
Start the game already!
So, it's been a while.
It's been a minute. A hot minute. This is a pretty good one, though. We've only rescheduled this one twice.
Yeah.
We should be playing D&D right now, but unfortunately, it's just, yeah.
It's that time of year where there just always seems to be something.
Yes.
So for context, I mean, my wife and I have been sick for, 3 months at this point. And it's up and down, been bad. We had a bit of a family emergency this past weekend when we were supposed to play D&D that had us pull out at the last minute. I hate pulling out at the last minute.
I mean, sometimes you just got to, though.
And it's not just us. It just seems everybody I know has stuff.
Well, yeah, and it's the Thanksgiving weekend coming up. Canadian Thanksgiving for anyone who's listening.
The real Thanksgiving.
Yeah, the first one. Like, yeah. So it's a long weekend. Everybody's planning or traveling or meeting family. Like I'm going up to Sudbury this weekend to meet with my family. You know, it's just nice to get together with family. I've been planning to go and visit all summer. And this weekend is the first opportunity we get. So I was going to come back early enough so that we could actually play D&D. But once again, you guys are like doing family things during a long weekend. It's just not right.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, that was my argument. I thought I was being entirely reasonable.
Yeah.
Overruled.
Yes. Real life comes first. It always does. And that it gets in the way of things.
So now that we're finally here, do we have anything we want to talk about, or are we just going to end the show and get into the jokes?
I mean, we probably could talk about some stuff. I mean, Baldur's Gate 3 now has in-game mod support, so I may start another playthrough of that.
Ooh. I need a drink before we talk about that, man. What do you got on the go?
I have a gin and tonic that I was intending to have finished before we even began, because there's a beer in the fridge that's calling my name, but I'm only like 3 sips into it. How about you, sir?
I'm desperate, man.
Uh-oh. Is it Bone Shaker?
No. I've been doing a lot of like half grocery shopping. You know, normally I'll do it's like $500 worth of groceries, and I'll go all out, get everything we need for a while. And, run to the LCBO if I need to or whatever. And with everything that we've had going on and the surprises and us just sort of being under the weather, it's been I'll go grab 2 or 3 days worth of stuff from somewhere I wouldn't normally do a big shop or whatever. And it hasn't afforded me the opportunity to stock up. So I'm finishing the last bit of the butter tart de-pantser.
That's a long callback.
So it's a 40 Creek butter tart creme liqueur, and I'm drinking it right out of the bottle.
Uh-oh. All right, so our next episode will be the intervention.
Probably should have had that episode a while ago.
Oh, yeah, about 30 years ago. Good God. What a week. The weather has been crazy. We have our very first frost warning today. So it may drop to below 0 overnight. And for context, it is the 10th of October.
Mm-hmm.
And the weather has got me sort of in that tired state. I don't know if, do you get that? It's like the days are starting to get a little bit shorter, and suddenly at 4:30 or 5 o'clock, I start thinking, man, I could really use a nap.
Yeah, it tends to work the other way around for me, where I'm consistently up until whenever, midnight, 1 o'clock kind of thing. Where I struggle is in the mornings, getting up and getting moving. I had a week, 2 weeks ago, a day where again, I wasn't feeling well. So I don't know, at 6 in the morning or something, my alarm isn't going to go off for a little while. I sat up in bed, and then I fell asleep sitting up in bed. My alarm, I either turned it off because I was already awake, or went off, I turned it off, stayed sitting up in bed, fell back asleep in bed, and I sort of checked, head bob, checked my phone, and it was about 17 minutes after I was supposed to start work.
Oh.
Yeah. That's kind of the stuff that I go through. Normally I'm on top of it, but that's probably the first time I've been late for work in, I don't know, 7 years. Like, it's not a regular occurrence, but it happened. And I work from home. So 17 minutes late for work equals 19 minutes late by the time I'm actually online.
Yeah.
So it could have been worse, but yeah, weather weird. So I waited to take the air conditioners out because we had, looking at the forecast, we actually had late last week a day that was, I don't know, 30-ish.
We had one of those too.
Then I'm like, okay, it looks like it's not going to get above, we're talking non-freedom units here, centigrade. We had, after that, it didn't look like it was going to get above 16, 17 kind of thing. And I don't know that it's been above 12. Yesterday, we had a weather system move through that was like polka dots, basically, if you looked at the radar map. So it wasn't like this big system of steady rain or something like that. It was just these smatterings of spots. And every spot brought something different. So it'd be clear. Then 15 minutes later, this little system would move through, or bits and pieces of a system. I don't know if it's spin off from one of the hurricanes that had already happened or whatever, but we'd get bad thunder and lightning and heavy rain, and it'd last 10 minutes and then it'd stop. And then I looked out and it's like, is that fucking hail? Because I'm working in my office and I got a window right beside me and I hear rattling on the glass. And
yep.
Canada, you go from summer to winter in a blink of an eye.
Oh, well, I mean, we have we turn the heat on overnight, and for a while there, we had air conditioning on during the day as well. The biggest swing in temperature that we had in one day was 40 degrees. It went from 30 degrees in the afternoon the day before to 10 below overnight. So, yeah, it's been single digits here for about a week, but just before that, last Friday, I guess, we had a day that was almost 30. I went golfing and I'm like, okay, should I wear long pants? It's a little chilly, maybe not. And by the end of the day, I was like, I'm really glad I wore shorts because it was hot.
Yeah, I just busted out the long pants actually a week ago.
Yeah.
All right. So now, do you want to talk about Baldur's Gate or do you have something else in mind?
I mean, that was the only Baldur's Gate news that I had, was that the patch showed up. I'm like, oh, I wonder what's in here. Oh, hey, cool. Mod support that's in game, which is neat. And it's nice. And it means that I'll probably, fire it up and see what that's like. Get halfway through Act 1 and stop again. We could talk video game things, or we could talk the, vague things that I threw in there a week ago that I'm not sure I remember what I wanted to talk about.
All right. Well, I don't know that we need to talk about how big of a Nickelback fanboy you are, which is basically what you're saying here.
Yes and no. I'm not sure that I would say that I'm a fan. For what I wrote in the show doc is that Nickelback is fine. They get a lot of hate. And I don't think they're super great or anything, but they're not bad. They're fine.
They're one of the biggest selling artists of all time. In terms of record sales, they're not far behind the Beatles. It's ridiculous to say that they're horrible. You might not like them. You might think, fine. Whatever. It's a style of music that not a lot of people listen to anymore, which is probably part of it. I actually really liked Nickelback before anybody knew who they were. And you ruined Nickelback for me because they finally came out with a song that went Main Street, that How You Remind Me song.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yes.
And you were obsessed with it enough that I think we played it 7 times on the way up to Grundy Lake, the Sudbury area, going camping. I was like, fuck Nickelback after that. You would sing along with that song. Not well.
Whatever. I like that song. It's a good song. I really like that one song that Theory of a Nickel Creed does.
You did have a serious topic here, though.
I did, and I wasn't sure if we wanted to tackle it, but I mean, I'm willing. Let's just jump right in.
All right. So you wrote down, why can't nerds gracefully accept fault when we're wrong?
Well, basically, we had some friends up last weekend, and I was replacing a toilet seat upstairs, like throwing away the cheap plastic shit and putting in a solid wood seat. And it's a weird kind of a toilet, right? Like when you put the bolts down through, you can't reach the nut on the back. So it has something in there that's like a rubber grommet that it turns out is a lot like a drywall anchor, except it's made of rubber. And I'm looking at it and going, well, how the hell does this work? Like, what are you supposed to do with this? Do I have to pull it up through? The friends who were coming up just sort of popped in and looked at he looked at it and said, well, what about this? And as he's explaining what he thinks it is, like I'm in my brain being really frustrated by someone else telling me something. I'm like, he's right and I'm wrong. And I was angry about it. And it got me thinking about how, and it ties into that sort of, the mansplaining phenomenon. It ties into the actually that, I mean, everybody kind of does, but it's very, very famously nerds do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I just got to thinking about, and I work with a lot of engineers, right, who are brainy, nerdy people almost by default. And the amount of, and it's not really arrogance. It's just almost like a constitutional inability to say, you know what? You're right.
Yeah.
Right. And I catch myself doing it, which is really why I thought this might be worthy of talking, because you do it too, right? Mm-hmm. I've noticed it and it frustrates me. And the reason it frustrates me is because I look at it and go, I do that. And it's annoying.
So there's a couple different ways that this goes down. And I don't think that I like making the direct correlation or causation between this being nerds that do it.
Oh no. Nerds are a subset of the people who do it for sure.
So assholes do it. So that's one, right? I find that assholes in general, they have an unfounded high opinion of themselves, their intellect, their capabilities, their whatever it is, right? Often assholes do that. Now, nerds, where they get into trouble, where I get into trouble, is that we know we're, I'll say, above average.
Mm-hmm.
Reasoning, problem solving, intellect. I'm not going to put us on too high of a pedestal here, but we just know based on experience and sort of going through life that that's part of what makes us nerds. So I think it's easy for us to just assume that we, I'm the smartest one in the room. Of course I'm right. Even if I'm not.
Yep.
And it isn't malicious necessarily intent.
Oh,
no. You're not stopping to fact check yourself. And I mean, the difference between you and an asshole is pretty minor at that point. The end result is kind of the same. Yes. I just think that there's sort of a more innocent way that nerds tend to fall into that trapping.
I agree. I mean, the thing is, I think what we're talking about here, at least a little bit, is the Dunning-Kruger effect. Where if you're dumb, you think you're really smart. And if you're really smart, then you have an understanding of how much you don't know. And that's definitely part of it. I think that the phenomenon that you're talking about would be somebody being wouldn't sort of post hoc look at the situation and go, was I wrong? Right. They would never even cross their mind to imagine was I over the top there? Was I in the wrong? And I tend to notice these things afterwards. And as I get older, it's getting closer and closer to the actual event that I realize, oops, right, I did that wrong.
So there's an interesting sort of other example of this, and it's probably less malicious in nature because it's, usually when you're right or wrong, sometimes it involves arguments with other people or something like that. And I'm going to maybe use your toilet seat thing as an example.
Sure.
there's a tendency for people, often nerds, to not read the fucking manual. Like the manual's right there.
Yeah.
The first thing you do when you open the box is you throw that shit away. You don't need it. And then, you get into trouble. And then there's sometimes that little ego thing at play where it's like, oh, I know I'm floundering here, but I'm not going to admit it and go get the manual that I just threw out, especially if somebody's watching.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. If somebody's watching, you just pretend you know what you're doing. Never mind that the house is burning down. How did you manage to set the house on fire by changing a toilet seat? I don't know.
It was the toilet's fault. Whoever installed the toilet.
Oh, yeah. No, it was totally the last guy. I noticed that a lot in when I was working in construction and the trades. Like, like the guys who dig the hole, they complain about the people who did the initial grading, and the guys who lay the block foundation complain about the guys who dug the hole. All the way up to the guys who, do the roof, complaining about the people putting in the drywall. It's always the last guy that was here was just an absolute moron.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, why do we do this to each other? Humanity is doomed.
And I suppose I need to say the obvious. This is mostly, but not exclusively, a men thing, right? Like there are women that fall into these trappings too. But I think even like intellectual women don't innocently fall into that as much as intellectual men do.
Yeah. I honestly, I find that it is more likely to happen with people who are at the bottom end of a bracket of intelligence, if that makes any sense.
Yes.
Right. Like when you talk to somebody who's truly spectacularly intelligent, they will listen to someone who disagrees with them and go, am I wrong? No, it's the children who are wrong. And people who are sort of, hey, I got here by the skin of my teeth, they'll be like, I'm going to pick a position. I'm going to hang on to it no matter what. I am going to argue even when it's been absolutely proven that I'm wrong, and just, get angrier and louder and angrier until everyone stops talking.
Yeah. Well, there's another thing that happens. Like you have that sort of, there's a person that falls into the trappings of appealing to authority, right?
Mm-hmm.
Trusting anything that sounds authoritative, whether or not it's rooted in fact. But there's that opposite thing where your comfort zone is representing yourself as an authoritative figure, doing or saying or backpedaling or anything that would cause other people to perceive you as less authoritative is just like a big punch to the dick.
Oh, it's kryptonite.
Yeah.
Yeah, which it's sort of funny. I've noticed like in meetings at work, and this flabbergasted me when I first noticed it. It is like as soon as I started talking, everyone else would shut up and listen, and I'm like, I'm not the authority here, but I'm tall and I'm a little big, and I don't stutter or hem and haw. Like I don't and pause very much. That was that the call center trains that out of you, right? If you say the customer just eats you. So I learned not to do that. So I noticed people just sort of paying attention. I'm like, why are you all paying attention to me? Right? Like where I work, I am often not the smartest person in the room. Like I'm reasonably intelligent. I think we can agree. But like I'll be in a room with people who have like multiple PhDs or potentially a Nobel Prize. I'm not the smartest person in the room. And for some reason, when I start talking, everybody goes, that's an interesting point. I'm like, what? No.
Now there's two ways to read that. One, they recognize that you contribute sort of opinions that are outside the very focused sort of way of thinking about things. The other, probably more likely reason that they do it is it's like the talking dog situation. It's like, oh, look at that puppy, he's talking. I don't want to interrupt him. He's so cute. I'm not going to listen to anything he says, but
Yeah, he's so cute and fuzzy. I just want to give him a hug. He's like a big hairy teddy bear.
Yeah, I mean, he's an idiot, but look at him go. Good for him.
Here's some safety scissors. Don't hurt yourself. It's entirely possible. I do know that there's like sometimes because people get so uptight about, like especially if you're brainstorming about something, people get so uptight about not saying something stupid. Right. And I'm 50. I don't care anymore. It's like, what are you going to do? Fire me? Like, seriously, you're not. It's too much of an effort to fire me. I still do good work. We'll be brainstorming something and I'll throw out the dumbest shit just because, like, especially if there's new people in the room, like young people who are just starting out, so that they can see, you know what? Like, it's okay to just say something dumb. It gets people talking.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it was a long, long time. Like I spent a long time in my career just, I'm not going to say anything. I'm going to be quiet because I'm not sure if I'm right. Right. I'm just not sure. And now I'm like, I don't care if I'm right. Right. I'm at the point now where I'm perfectly fine to say, this is what I think. If I'm wrong, tell me. Because if I'm wrong and someone tells me, I've learned something. And that's awesome.
I will say age doesn't give everybody that kind of perspective.
Oh, God, no.
I find most people as they age almost get worse. Mm-hmm. So it's good that you've managed to find, and probably a lot of that is the environment that you're in. You can't convince yourself that you're the smartest person in the room, No,
I can't. And it was a new experience for me, actually, this job. Because before that it was, quite often I was the smartest person in the room, or at least, in a room full of 10 people, I'm in the top 2, now it's like I walk into a room and go, I might be in the top half. Maybe not. I've noticed it, like most of the things that, like, cause I've worked really hard on a lot of this stuff, but a lot of the normal arcs that people do as they go older, I've actually gone backwards. I've gone the other way. I'm becoming less conservative as I get older. I'm becoming less. What's the word I'm looking for? I am doing that thing though, where like when my stove is flashing 12 o'clock, I look at it and go, oh, I'm not sure if I know how to fix this.
The man who used to make joke about 12 o'clock flashers has become the ultimate 12 o'clock flasher.
Oh, yeah.
It makes me sad, man. It's hard to see, honestly. It's like watching a train wreck, right? I can't look away.
Well, I look at, like, how much energy have I got? Because I'm an old man now. And if I spend all of my brain energy making the thing flash 11 o'clock instead of 12 o'clock, how am I going to sort out my pills for the week?
All right. Well, do you want to talk about some video games?
Let's talk about that.
I used to be an adventurer like you.
Stay a while and listen.
So since I made this note, I have actually finished the main campaign in Horizon Forbidden West. And I think probably we should say from here on out, if you want to know, if you want to experience the story of Horizon Forbidden West, which I suggest you do, it's very good. Spoilers from here on. How much that matters, I don't know. It was fairly well telegraphed. But the note that I made here was that Aloy is Kim Possible. And I can't remember exactly what I was thinking when I wrote that. But I do remember hearing someone talking about Kim Possible and Ron Stoppable. I think it was on the Actually show. And I got to thinking about, like, Kim Possible is kind of a weird, even for cartoons, it's weird. And I got to thinking about, like, how much stuff Aloy accomplishes, and how much of a sort of traditional Mary Sue her character is. Mm-hmm. But I played through for Zero Dawn, which I think I put 90 hours into, 100 hours, something like that. I put 132 hours into Forbidden West before I finished the main story, which is way more than you actually need. Like, it's way more. I spent a lot of time going back and forth and talking to random people. I've literally done all of the side quests that popped up during the main story. I've done a bunch of, just go here and go there in order to farm stuff, to upgrade stuff, all of which is not necessary, especially playing on story mode. But I had a lot of fun. I'm still enjoying it. I'm still doing it. I went to start Burning Shores and realized, I'm not going to be able to get back right away. And I rolled back because there were a couple of side quests that I wanted to do before that. And now I'm like, well, I'm going to upgrade. I've got 4 items that I want to max upgrade on before I move on. So anyway, so the point is that Aloy is kind of a Mary Sue, but the reason I say how long I spent is because it's literally at this point that I'm like, hey, you know what? She's kind of a Mary Sue.
So here's an interesting sort of exploration, a question for you. When I think about video games, and there's this game sort of has we'll call it a liberal dose, like a paint job of technobabble applied to all of it. Mm-hmm. So the general tone and vibe is a little bit different than I think most similar video games. So my question for you would be, do you think the things that you think make her feel a little bit more like a Mary Sue in this game are related to the slightly different tone of the game? Or do you think this way about typically male protagonist hero characters of similar adventure style games?
Well, that was the thing that I actually wanted to bring up, is that standard of like, is this person a Mary Sue, is not equally applied male, female protagonist. But the sort of bigger point that I wanted to get to was that even though you can apply that label, I don't think it matters in this case. Because while it is technically probably true, right, she is written as, rather than, and to compare and contrast, we talked about sort of Mary Sue stuff when we talked about the Star Wars A New Hope. And what's her name?
So you must be thinking of Force Awakens then when we were talking about Rey.
Yes, sorry, Rey was who I was thinking of. Okay. Where she's kind of like, I don't know how I'm doing it, right? Which to me is kind of problematic. In the case of Aloy and the Horizon games, she's just presented as like a genius, right? She's just very smart. She is the hero. She's the protagonist. She's exceptional. And she does all these exceptional things, and that's fine. Right? If it was like, I'm just going to bumble into this and I don't know anything, tee-hee, but everything works out, right? Then I think it's a problem. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, there is, as you say, like you don't even think about it. Like if Aloy was a dude, you'd just be like, oh, well, yeah, dude's just smart. No big deal.
It's such a good game and such a good character that it's hard to find a male analog for it. There's some games that have strong male characters. I know some of them you haven't played, like Nathan Drake in the Uncharted series, and even like Geralt in the Witcher series of games, where the subject matter is just so different. Like a lot of the things that happen in games like that, less Uncharted. I haven't played through all the Uncharted games, just sort of for context. I haven't played through like one of them, I think.
I watched the movie.
Oh, not even close to the same. A lot of what happens in those games, like I think about Geralt as an example, is a sort of a strong lead. Most of the stuff that happens in the game comes down to him, and this applies to the books in the show, right? Choosing to break with his own sort of code, like, the written code of I'm a Witcher and this is what Witchers are supposed to do, and choosing to be involved with something because he thinks it's the right thing to do. Yes, he's a Witcher and he has abilities that other people don't have, and he has he's charismatic and he's a capable character, but it doesn't have that sort of sheen of knows stuff. What I think about Aloy, I think what they did a really good job with is she doesn't just know stuff. They've done a really good job of showing how she's learned stuff. And a lot of the game is, I don't know this. I'm going to do what I have to do and work really hard to find out. So she just isn't a smarty pants know-it-all. Now, some of the stuff that she is inherently capable of doing that other people aren't because, she's inherently capable, but because of who she is, how she was created, the person from the past that she is essentially the genetic clone of, that enables her to do things that other people just aren't capable of doing. But it's explained, right? Like there's none of this.
Yeah, she learns stuff, and that's I think the crux of the whole thing is that, like, there's some of it, like like she jumps off of mountains or whatever, and she can do combat rolls with 3 bows on her back. I mean, that kind of stuff is like, okay, but it's a video game, and you have to you hand wave that away, and it's fine. But it just the reason that I wanted to bring it up was because this is. She is a character who, if they didn't do that, if they didn't develop that correctly, if she didn't develop in the story the way that she did, then we would all have a problem with all of the stuff she can do. Right. But all of the stuff she can do is all of this amazing stuff, but it's just fine. You just accept it because she's a genius, and she spent literally her entire life training to do this. So it's entirely expected.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I thought it was interesting, and I was sort of like juxtaposing Kim Possible and Aloy in my head and going, yeah. I mean, the archetype fits. It's fine.
Yeah. I mean, the thing with cartoons and stuff like that is, I mean, almost every one of them has that character.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you have to. Otherwise the story doesn't happen. You need a hero. This is the hero of the story. The hero has to be heroic. That's fine.
I suppose an interesting contrast to it is the V character. Now, whether you play through as male or female in Cyberpunk, where for the most part, there's times where you feel like you know stuff and you're a hero, but I think you spend most of that game feeling like you're one step behind and just kind of reacting to the shit that's happening. So your actions and decisions come from desperation rather than superiority or capability.
Mm-hmm.
There are certain missions where that's not the case, where you feel a little bit more like a specialist, and some stuff in the expansion that comes across that way a little bit as well. But as sort of the big games that I've played recently, it's sort of interesting to compare and contrast those. The other game I played in the middle was Starfield, and that was
almost good enough.
No, it's that typical Bethesda game where
oh yeah,
your character's a blank slate. The entire summation of your character and their traits are the actions that you do.
Mm-hmm.
You have a bit of a dialogue wheel, but that's sort of it. You have to go back to BioWare stuff like Mass Effect to kind of find sort of strong characters like that. Commander Shepard, FemShep specifically, probably gets painted with a similar brush to Aloy.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it's less about knowing stuff. I mean, there's sort of you played through enough of the first Mass Effect game to know that
Well, I finished the first one.
Okay, so there's you're granted visions. Spoiler alert for a million-year-old game, but you have a contact with an alien beacon of sorts, which gives you visions of stuff that either could happen or has already happened. Shocker, it's both. And that, gives you knowledge that other people don't have, and sort of operate within those confines. But anyway, I don't know where I was really going with that, other than that, I'm having a hard time finding a character, male or female, that serves as a good comparison to.
I don't think there is one. Yeah. I think Aloy as a character is fairly unique. There's an interesting thing about we've talked a bit before about how we approach games a little bit differently.
Mm-hmm.
One of the reasons that I got through this game with that, like one playthrough, like I didn't go backtrack or try, and I had a lot of trouble with Baldur's Gate 3, is that there really isn't any options. Like you can do things in this game in any order you want to. But there's one story, there's one choice, it's a railroad, but it's an awesome railroad. So it is almost like, it's almost like watching a movie on TiVo, right? Where I can pause it whenever, I can go and watch something else and come back and pick up where I left off. And to me, that like this is almost the ideal form of an RPG game for me, where I don't have a whole lot of, well, I need to see all 75 possible endings, right? There's only really one possible ending, right? Like there's a few different places where your dialogue can go differently, but the through line of the story is the same.
Yeah, you know what? I never really thought about it until you mentioned it, but now that I think about it, it's pretty striking how, like, even in typical RPG fashion, you typically have choices. Sometimes it's like, ooh, good or evil, or, renegade paragon in the case of Mass Effect stuff, or making decisions between characters. One of them's going to die or the other one, You typically have that kind of stuff. And really the only thing that jumps out at me that I recall, now granted it's been a few weeks since I finished the game, was the decision to let Regala live or not. And I mean, it has
zero effect.
Zero effect. Yeah. Like I think she shows up maybe in the final battle or whatever if you let her live.
She does. Yeah. But, I let her live and she does. She follows you out. You have some interesting conversations with her voice actor, by the way, is fucking awesome. You have a conversation with her before you go to the final confrontation, and then she does a thing during the final confrontation and then dies. That's it. So you get to hear her talk a little bit more, and that's more or less it.
Angela Bassett that plays her, right? Like big name.
I did not know that.
Yeah. I don't know if she's done much video game work, but like it's an impossible to not really recognize voice. Like it was good. There's a lot of that in that game though. It's all so fucking good.
It is. I still find the barks have actually gotten worse as I've gone through the game. So it's like, yeah, Aloy, you are our hero. You should, and Hikaru's champion and stuff. It's just like, man, who did you get to do those bits? Like anyone else. And if the person who did those things is listening, I'm sorry, man. It's so jarring from the rest of the game. So I have a question for you.
Yes.
How many rocks do you have in your inventory at the end of the game?
I don't know. I got very quickly to the point where I wasn't going around mashing the button to pick stuff up.
Oh, I had auto pickup turned on.
I didn't even know auto pickup existed. So
it does until your inventory is full. It won't auto pick up and send to your stash. Like once your inventory is full, you have to hit the E button. But rocks are all in your local inventory. So I now have almost 600 rocks.
Yeah. I bet you I probably have less than 20, 30.
You don't need more than about 5, right? And that was the major difference I found between this game and Zero Dawn. Is in Zero Dawn, you were allowed to have 20 rocks, and that was it. But on the other hand, you also had that whistle thing in Zero Dawn, and I missed that in this game. Because you can't throw a rock behind you and have them come up for a silent strike, right? And in Zero Dawn, you could go, hey, come here, and then silent strike and kill stuff. Yeah, I missed that. We had a conversation last week or last time we recorded about the final confrontation in the game and how you were disappointed by it. And at that point, I did not have much of an insight into the Zeniths. So you were trying really hard not to spoil it for me.
All right. So let's kind of move through it chronologically then. We'll work our way towards the ending because you kind of, when we last talked about it, we're at the point where shit was going to start happening.
Yeah, just before Gemini, I think it was.
Yeah. So let's talk about Varro, first of all. How did you feel about how that played out? I
feel absolutely no shame in saying this. I was sitting in front of my computer crying.
Yeah.
Yeah, with all of especially when people were sort of talking about, because when it went down, I was like, oh my God, they just killed Varl. Like, what the fuck?
See, and it's interesting how what they had to do to make you have feelings there, right? Because like if you're putting yourself in the character of Zoe or of Aloy rather, right? Like she spent her whole life trying not to have relationships with people. And at that point in time, she's still like hesitantly testing it in the water. So I think if it wasn't for Varl's relationship with Zoe, I probably wouldn't have felt much.
No, and you wouldn't. I mean, Varl he wouldn't give up. He's like, I'm going to be your friend, even if you don't want me to. Right. And I mean, that definitely played into it. But then he brought everyone together. He was the Xander character from Buffy.
Yeah.
Right. He's that guy who's like he's not super powered like everyone else. Right. But he's there and he's trying hard and he's the glue that's holding everyone together. You know, and then, like I say, when the actual thing happened and he died, I was like, well, that sucks. Right. But then you go back to base, right. And you hear the people talking to each other. And then you go and see the memorial thing that Zoe has built for him. And, you know, she's talking and it's like, oh man, like just, oh God.
Well, and they expertly crafted like stuff that you didn't know is going to be connected, right?
Yes.
Specifically like the stuff with the seed pouches for the
Utaru.
Utaru, yes. You know, that whole stuff. They set that up and it pays off in like a personal way. The relationship obviously with Zoe a little bit more directly. You know, and the fact that like you realize in your own character that Varl is the one that is showing you the better way, bringing people together, and you're sort of for the first time realizing that, you know, your team's better than
you can't do it alone. Yeah.
So I thought that played out well. I thought it was telegraphed a little bit, and this is just the way I look at video games when it's like, oh, everybody here has given me a little bit of a side quest series to go on, except Varl. He's going to die soon, isn't he?
I did not see it coming.
Yeah.
There was, I mentioned, I think when we first started talking about when I first met Beta, that like, oh, Beta is going to turn out to be like a double agent. Right. And I was wrong, but that role was fulfilled instead by a different person. So all of the predictions that I made about stuff was not technically accurate, but a lot of it was, this is a character slot or position that is going to be filled by somebody. And almost all of those came to pass somewhere or other. I do like the telegraph that they did for the next game. So 6 years from now, we'll be having a chat about whatever that is.
Yeah.
Horizon Nemesis.
I find funny, I don't know if you caught the announcement, but they're like, and it's not that old, but they're putting out both a PC and a PS5 remaster of the first game, basically using like the engine and modeling and rigging from the second game, which is like, okay, I mean, yeah, that's cool because the second game looks, you know, how it looks, and most people think it's better. But the first game was also not that long ago and pretty fantastic looking, you know?
Yeah, still great. Still great.
Like, I don't know that I would feel the need to replay it just because there's a new higher fidelity version coming out, but
no,
maybe by
I'll
the
go
time
back
it comes
and
out, maybe I'll feel different about it. But
I mean, maybe I'm probably going to go back and play the first game again because there's a few callbacks in this game where I'm like, what? Who is that again? Right. And that's, I mean, part of that's just my memory, right? Like I especially in video games, like I blow past stuff and it's like, okay, well, you need to do such and such for so-and-so. I'm like, who's that again? Right. Typical, like it's a typical D&D trope, right? Like the bartender, what's his name? I don't know. Bob. Yeah.
All right. So in general, then, how did you feel about the stuff sort of around the tribal conflict, Hikaru and Regala and?
It was interesting. I mean, it felt true to human nature, right? Like there was nothing where I was going, this wouldn't happen. And it's like, no, this is like, we see shit like this in the news every day. Like this is how people react. I don't like how he's doing stuff, so we need to start like some kind of violent conflict to resolve it.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that it was all engineered by Silence really just sort of plays into, oh, okay. Like the whole thing really neatly dovetailed without being extremely telegraphed, right? Like you knew something was going on. You knew there was something operating in the background. And you can assume that Silence is behind some of it. But the way that they brought sort of his overall motivation around to the end, where it's like he is the anti-Aloy, right? Where he does everything on his own, but he does it in a way that is unhelpful to anyone. It's like, I want to save all the life on the planet, but I don't care who I have to kill to get there.
Yeah.
Right. Which is exactly the opposite, but the same end goal. I thought that was kind of neat. Like I said, the tribal conflict, the Sons of Prometheus, all that stuff felt like, okay, there are factions in this world that want different things and are willing to do whatever it takes to get there. Feels kind of organic.
Yeah. I felt that I don't want to say I was let down by it. Like the setup for it was big, right? Like, because it's literally some of the first important shit that happens. And to me, and maybe it's just the sort of way I mowed through it, the resolution of that, I'm going to go get my flying mount and sort of swoop in and sort of one-on-one regala and then it's wrapped up, felt a little bit rushed. And I know that, like, I think I'm in my head detaching that from all of the, like, the outposts that I've gone in and sort of defeated. And, like, you know, there's all of this stuff that kind of happened between then in the world that was loosely connected to it. But I think that final conflict with her felt...
It's tough. It's tough to live up to the buildup.
Well, because there was that sort of interlude in the middle that happened, like where she came and attacked the museum place, the cool route, right? Where that was like super epic.
Yeah, the combat with her didn't feel super epic. We need to talk about the final fight and just remember this conversation when we get there. I agree that there needed to be, like, it's hard to build up to more epic because that cool route fight was like epic, right? I think though that like the way to fix that is to have a little bit more interaction with Regala. Right, like where I don't know, randomly as you're attacking some outpost, she sort of shows up and, you know, like runs away rather than dying, right? Like she's unkillable and she just escapes.
Yeah.
You know, she needs to taunt you a little bit more.
Yeah, and I don't know whether, like, I don't know, you kind of go in and...
Yeah, you just punch her in the face a bunch of time.
Drop an EMP essentially to take her machines out or something like that. Like, just, I think the plan, like, went off as designed.
Yeah.
I think maybe like that whole situation just needed like a 15-minute diversion where it's like you're not winning, you know, where it's just like, ooh, things went sideways, or, you know, there were machines that your EMP didn't kill, or just something else. I don't know. I really enjoyed that aspect of the game and the plot. I think even more than the Zenith stuff. So I'm a little bit sensitive to the fact that, like, it just instantly took a back seat once the Zenith stuff was kind of revealed, and the fact that she was sort of the pawn for Silence to attack the base and do that stuff. So, it was still good.
It was still good, but I agree. It left a little bit. It was set up as kind of like, this is going to be the epic thing, and then you realize, nope, this is only like the first stop on the ascent to the actual climax of the game. So should we get to what's the next thing that happens there?
Well, let's talk about the Zenith stuff and Tilda.
Okay. All right. So the thing that I thought was going to happen with Beta happened with Tilda, where she was helping you right up until the end, and then it was like this weird love triangle bullshit thing, which I was thinking about this the other day, because you were talking about when you did that, you're like, sort of the final fight with where she wraps herself up in the Terminator, the T-1000.
Yeah.
You found that a little bit of a letdown. And I was thinking about that, and I thought, you know what? I was okay with that because to me, that part of the story wasn't actually the climax. It was the denouement. To me, the climax of the story actually happened at Gemini. To me, that was the peak of the story, right? That's where everything came to a head, and everything after that was sort of an extended epilogue.
Yeah, except that, that's the typical sort of second act where you get your ass kicked. If it were a trilogy of movies, Gemini would have been The Empire Strikes Back,
Sure, fair enough, and that's why I say, like, I'm okay with them not trying to build up to a giant space laser shooting into the sky.
Yeah,
right, where it's like, okay, yeah, you fight these people, and yeah, they were like super kick-ass. Oh my god, we're never going to win until whoop, we take away their one superpower, and suddenly, you know what? They're kind of pussies, and I was okay with that. Like, it could have gone another way. It would have been perfectly fine as well if it was a giant epic battle with all kinds of stuff. And it was a little bit epic, but a lot of the epic was the team coming together and doing team stuff rather than Aloy being Superwoman or whatever.
Well, and that's why, like, you know what, that whole lead up to that, right, where you do some traversal, right, and you fight some things, you do a little bit of traversal. And then there's a cut scene where you see the team doing stuff, and it's like, yeah, I'm part of this big group effort. Like, everything that they set up with Aloy no longer being able to go on her own and how much she needs the other people to succeed. That all felt great. I would have rather than the Tilda in a mech suit finale, I would have rather watched a cut scene of more team stuff just happening for another 5 minutes than that. Now, I know that you need to you need
personal involvement somehow.
And part of that was they needed a vehicle to set up the Nemesis stuff and
yes,
the next game. And I guess that's kind of how they had to do it. But it'll be interesting to see if you feel any different about it after you go through Burning Shores.
Yeah, we'll have to see. There's that. I think I might go through the new game thing. Another sort of difference, I think, between, and I thought of this after we hung up last time, about how we go through these games is I typically don't play through a second time. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I do, but typically it's I want to do everything the first time, and then I'm basically done. I may go through and do a new game plus whatever that turns out to be. I'm kind of thinking I'd like to go through and only use slingshots and spike throwers.
Go through Burning Shores before you do New Game Plus.
Oh, I will.
It isn't a big spoiler because it's literally like the first thing that happens once you start into the Burning Shores content. Silence will tell you we did a body count and one of the Zeniths wasn't there.
One's missing. Yeah, I did get that far. I went and talked to him. We did the sort of cutscene with him. I went to Burning Shores and my Sunwing got destroyed. And I'm like, oh, I can't get, but I had other quests. So I actually went back to an older save game.
Okay.
And continued from there.
Yeah. So Burning Shores becomes sort of an exploration of one particular Zenith.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, that whole thing was off-putting too, right? There's this underlying sort of current of like, superior ambition breeds, like these really shitty people,
mm-hmm.
right? Like they didn't set up so much in the main campaign. You got it a little bit with that one Zenith. Was also just like how fucking weird they are.
Oh, yeah.
Like they're inhuman in a way that like isn't explained by the fact that they've lived for 1,000 years and sort of surpassed humanity or lost humanity or whatever it is. Like they're weird in a way that they were obviously always weird. And that just sort of was amplified by thousands of years of being demigods or whatever, enabled by their technology and position and whatnot.
Should we talk about Ted Farrow?
Well, yes, that's the interesting thing, right? Like that dive into what happened with him afterwards. I mean, that felt good, weird, definitely fucked up. off-putting in all sorts of ways. But like as sort of a follow-up to the first game and a reminder of like this person that you never saw who was like just an important person in how things unfold in the first game, it was nice to see that. I kind of wish we'd got that more about the Zeniths in the main campaign of this game instead. And you do get that in Burning Shores.
Okay, that's fair enough.
But only about the one Zenith, and that's absolutely as weird as the Ted Faro shit.
He's a proxy for all of the Zeniths and all of those people, and for the current, corporate leaders in our world now. Speaking of the Ted Faro, there was that thing where you got to do the delve into his tomb or whatever. Well, his lab, his thieves. How far into that were you before you're like, I just want to, please tell me I get to shoot this guy in the face. Please tell me I get to kill this guy.
So what do you think of the decision then to not he's alive and you don't even get to see him?
I'm okay with that part. I think that's the kind of thing that leaving it to your imagination is actually probably the superior path. I'm talking about the guy who thinks he's Ted Faro reincarnated.
Okay, yes, that guy.
Yeah, like he literally, before we even started down, before he said, you must put on the ceremonial vestments of the assistant, Elizabeth, whatever her last name is, I've forgotten. Even before that, I was like, please tell me that I get to kill this guy. I want to shoot him in the face. I found out later, and I may actually go back to an old save game to do this, that you can shoot him. He's invulnerable, but he doesn't react except to react as though he's been shot. Like when you shoot a bandit in the head and they go, oh, and stagger. He does that and then doesn't react otherwise. And I'm like, I just want to go through that whole mission again. Just like every time he says something, I shoot him in the face. Because he's such an asshole.
Yeah. But again, sort of a situation where there could have been an interesting decision to make there with his character if they'd have put it in Aloy's hands, right? Aloy, he's on his knees in front of you. You've defeated him. What do you want to do with him? And they
shoot him in the face.
Well, they seem to intentionally sort of not give you those kinds of decisions, save for the Regala thing. Yeah. And even with the Regala thing, it's not like you get to execute it. You don't dirty your own hands with it if you have. You must have let her live?
I did, yes.
Okay. So I had her, I said that we just can't let you live. And Catalo basically just like, I get halfway through the sentence and he's like stabbed her.
I mean, the thing is that yes, she has to die. But I looked at it and I said, you know what? You can be useful if you're willing to be useful, right? This is the death that you were going to have anyway.
Yeah.
Will you do it like in the service of something greater?
And the way I looked at it sort of as I was in that sort of position was that Hikaru had already made that decision with her once. Mm-hmm. And it cost them almost everything. So they very, very carefully set it up so that's like, are you going to make that same mistake again?
Yeah. No, and I think that there is validity on both sides of that decision. I did actually agonize a little bit over it. Because I thought, I think like in the real world, it would probably be like you're too dangerous to be allowed to live.
I mean, you've already told me how you felt the ending itself then. The fight with Tilda and the setup for Nemesis for the new stuff.
I thought it was okay. I thought it tied everything up reasonably neatly. I think everything that happened felt like it felt good. It had the right, I don't know, is it the right flavor, I guess, like all of it. That fight itself was very Mickey Mouse, right? I mean, I was level 60 when I did that fight. So I didn't have all of my weapons completely upgraded, but I was shooting her with legendary bows and shit. So it was, what is she susceptible to? All right, load her up with, here's another thing that I want to bring up is the combat that I was having problems with, but afterwards. So I just loaded her up with whatever it was. I think it was plasma, but I can't remember, and then, threw advanced bombs at her with my slingshot.
Mm-hmm.
And staggered and then like roped in for the big old stab. So the fight itself was kind of anticlimactic, and I'm okay with that. Like, I'm okay with that because she was right. The way that her character was set up, right, was that, oh, I'm so superior to everyone and everyone should just do it, because she is, in the end, she is Zenith, right? And whatever Elizabeth saw in her is still there, and she's not worthy. And that is very much proved by that fight, because she went down like the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man.
Yeah.
And I think that's appropriate for that fight.
Yeah, I'll be interesting to see if you feel the same way after you finish Burning Shores, because you have a climax with that Zenith too, and it couldn't be more different. Like it is
epic and difficult.
I won't say any more. Difficult, yeah, to a certain extent. The way it plays out, I think like the difficulty doesn't matter. Like you feel like you're performing great feats of strength and bravery, regardless of how difficult it actually is. It finds a way to sort of make the difficulty just not matter. I have a feeling that some people playing through that will say the opposite, that like, it felt like you were playing through like a basically long series of like quick time events or something like that. It wasn't quite like that, but I think some people will try and paint it that way.
There's an analogy there that's not entirely wrong.
Well, it's, yeah, like it just, the style of gameplay even just changes for the last bit, but in a way that I think allowed the climax to be more than it otherwise would have been, right? Because I think my beef with the finale, both with my fight with Regala and with Tilda, was it's just like, oh, I'm just doing the same shit that I've been doing the entire game. I'm dodge rolling around in a circle, and I'll hide behind this thing when I need to hide behind it and move around and counter her with this, and then pull out my bow that does the most tear and go at her, and
away you go. That's something that I wanted to bring up, because I was even on easy mode, I think, not story mode.
Yeah.
I was finding the combat not difficult because there was not really any risk involved, right? Like, I've never died in combat. I have died a couple of times by falling off. Most notably, the very first time that I jumped off my flying mount, because I was trying to jump off the mount and glide, right? So I was going, E to jump off and then spacebar, and it was just zipping me back to the mount. So I was jumping off and then waiting and then holding spacebar, right? Until I figured out you can just hit E and then hit C, just hold down C, and you will start gliding immediately, because C is an alternate bind for that glider.
Oh, see, and I didn't even know that. I was annoyed by that sort of same type of issue. I never died as a result of it, but there were lots of times where it's like, jump, grapple up to it, jump, wait a little bit longer, grapple up to it anyways. Fuck me.
Yes, it was annoying. Yeah, but if you hit E and then just hold down C as soon as you start the animation, you just start gliding immediately. So I never died as a result of combat, but I was like, oh my God, like I'm chain stunned forever, and it takes like 35 arrows to kill anything. Oh my God. Until I realized, like, whatever the thing is susceptible to, you load it up with that and then start poking it with arrows, and now it's taking 2 or 3. Right? It is such a massive difference. And in Zero Dawn, it didn't really matter. Like, you just picked your highest damage weapon and went ham. Right? And now it's like, okay, well, if you pick the right ammo, right? And I didn't figure out plasma until very recently, where it's like you gotta do the thing, and then there's another one, and then it takes 15 seconds, and then it goes boom. So, I mean, you load it up with plasma, hit it with two or three big hits, and then just run away, and it'll explode. Anyway, so I'm much less annoyed with combat than I was.
All right.
Melee's still annoying because the camera just bounces everywhere.
So before we move on to some quick table talk, I just want to give another shout out to Satisfactory. I've been playing it like not even 2 weeks since I got into it after 1.0 dropped. I think my playtime is right now at like 79 hours in this playthrough. a bunch of asterisks, because one of the things I never think about how much I like this about this game is that like I can do stuff and then basically walk away and leave the game running in some instances and then come back to it and progress, right? Like if I want to set up a bunch of stuff to manufacture parts or whatever, like I won't get into the details of it, but you can do that and then wait. Time is a resource in this game. And as long as you're in an area where you're not being attacked by anything or whatever, it's fine. So like I was watching like a hockey game the other night and, I ended up moving downstairs to finish watching it down in the bedroom in front of my computer. And it's like, okay, well, I'll watch this period. Okay, it's intermission. I'm going to go do some stuff, play some Satisfactory during intermission. And then I just switch tabs back to watch the hockey game. And it's just like every time I jump out to commercials, I just flip back and I do a couple more things. And so a lot of the time in my playthrough is time that I'm not actually actively playing the game. I'm passively playing it, but in a way that doesn't feel like the game is playing itself. So shout out to that. For the new stuff in 1.0, I want to give a shout out to the voice talent because we did this for Horizon. There isn't like NPCs in the traditional sense in this game. You have an AI assistant or director, Ada, that you talk to, who some of her dialogue in 1.0 is just absolutely unhinged in a fantastic way. And in the pre-release versions of the game, there was these alien artifacts that were spread out throughout the world that didn't do anything yet. Like they were very clear, this is going to be for the future stuff, Mercer spheres and summer sloops and whatnot. And they had some interesting like dialogue that happened as you approached them where a strange voice would say strange things, but there was a couple or three lines and they ended up like pivoting into a different direction anyway. So some of the old dialogue that you got in the early release versions of it doesn't play into whatever they're setting up story-wise with them now. There's this weird sort of unsettling nature to them. Like, when you watch Star Trek, the Next Generation, and you get into I guess there would be the first season episode with the Borg where you first meet the Borg collective and you hear them speak. And, they're speaking as a collective in many voices, we are the Borg. Resistance is futile. You will be assimilated, stuff like that. There's that sort of unsettling nature to that. When these things speak, they speak in that sort of unsettling way. Not exactly the same way as the Borg, but there's just like sort of several voices forming one. But it's like something that's trying to figure out how to communicate with you, and it's saying words that don't have meaning, but kind of have meaning. And it's almost poetic. Like, there will be lines where it's like, consume our blood and stuff like that, isn't literal consume our blood, or lots of like weird sort of references to temples and effigies. And towards the end of Firefly, the River Tam character, once she started becoming a little bit less sort of crying, screamy, kind of annoying character and actually a functioning part of the crew, when she would say weird things that would just be like I know what those words are, but they don't fit together to quite say exactly what you're trying to say, or, imagine her as a Borg collective.
Oh,
and you end up with the way these things are. So it's just, it's unsettling and poetic and funny at the same time. Eventually, like the alien artifacts in your AI that you have start trying to have conversations with each other, both completely ignoring you as the main character, or talking about you like you're just a piece of meat. It's quite funny. I suspect that there's probably not going to be a lot of like your typical story in this game. Probably not going to be a lot of like, ooh, I solved some mysteries and I made an alien at the end of it. I think mostly I'm getting what I'm getting based out of this dialogue that becomes a little bit more clear in meaning as I do more stuff. But in terms of performances, it knocks it out of the park. Around update 7 or 8, I think it was update 8 in the pre-release, they switched from older Unreal Engine to Unreal 5. And then for 1.0, tweaked a lot of the environment design. Not a complete makeover. Some of it is just like details, color choices, foliage, stuff like that. And it just slaps real hard too. So nothing I've said implies factory builder simulator game. and that's one of the things that makes it special. So again, even if it's not your thing, I encourage anybody out there to give it a shot.
Well, it's worth a try. It's on my list.
All right, we're into table talk.
I'm really hoping this first note is yours and not mine.
Uh-oh, I think we got a problem. No, it's mine.
Okay.
So I have an idea. And to be more accurate, I'm borrowing somebody else's idea and kind of turning it into something else. Did you watch, I can't remember when it came out, the Ginny D video about her being sort of recruited to go do the D&D in a castle thing?
Yeah.
Okay. So I got thinking about that a little bit more. And I mean, that's obviously sort of a big way over the top kind of thing. But dialing it back down, turning it from 11 down to something like a 6.5 or a 7. The idea that I have is something I think we could probably try like as a friends group first, but then maybe it could kind of become a thing. And that is, I got a tentative name of like Torchlight Tabletop or something like that for it, but take that D&D in a castle thing and do something different, like set up a game on a long weekend in the middle of a fucking forest, not backyard where there's some trees, in a forest.
Like backwoods Algonquin.
Yeah, where, it's about creating atmosphere, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like smell of trees, sound of birds, like that's all cool if you're playing like a D&D game or something like that. But I'm thinking also like playing like a really sort of dark and deep Call of Cthulhu game at like 10 o'clock at night around a campfire, like torchlight, like, let's be honest, we're all pasty white dudes and we're not big fans of bugs. You'd probably have to like have a big ass screen tent and set that up and whatnot, but you're still out in the environment, cut off from reality a little bit, where, that coyote making noise in the woods, or that bear in the distance, or that moose that's stepping on some brush and cracking, like that's going to heighten, create a sense of tension for some people that will, I think, heighten the experience of playing games like that. And I'm not sure what it would look like. Like you could look at something like Algonquin or even some conservation areas and stuff like that allow you to do like rentals for group events as long as you're not leaving anything behind. And
well, there's various campsites and campgrounds in sort of the provincial park where you can rent a yurt, which is ideal for that kind of thing.
Yeah. And I mean, you could theme it a little bit differently, but the idea of like taking a long weekend, having a group of DMs, right? So you get three or four DMs. Eventually, like, if this turns into less of a you going out and playing with your friends and more of a, wouldn't it be cool to organize these events and actually have people come and attend them, a la LAN parties or something like that, where you recruit the DMs, you put on like the sort of full thing, people buy tickets and show up, and whether it's you got a pig roast going on, or whether, depending on the setting and what's available to you, D&D outside in the wilderness, Call of Cthulhu, spooky horror games, other activities too, but sort of just more in situ style, the kind of thing that people aren't going to do necessarily on the regular, but probably would love to try it once or twice.
I mean, we are Canadian, so at some point someone is going to jump over the campfire.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's why it's, tabletop by torchlight. Anyway, like I could see a situation where I kind of like the LAN party thing is a good comparison, where it's like well, I got all the network equipment and we've got all of these tables that we picked up. Like, you could have tents, you could have, organized food and drinks and make that part of what people are paying to get in on. And they can just show up. You've got DMs arranged already. There's one-shots prepped and other activities throughout the weekend so that people can get into multiple things and crash and get up the next day. And I know insurance and liability stuff you got to think about. Like, there's a whole million reasons not to do it.
Yeah.
But
I mean, it's a cool idea. I like that. I do. I think we need to workshop the name a little bit.
Oh, yeah. It's not a real name. It's just kind of what I'm calling it to sell the idea to myself,
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a great idea. It's nifty. The only, I had an unkind thought. If you're going to invite a whole bunch of strangers to play D&D, being outside is probably a good thing because some nerds have a BO thing. I don't know if you've ever been to one of the Adventurers League things that they held in that little store downtown, but they had, I don't know, like I went, I think once, maybe twice. Fun time, great people, good games. But you put like 18 or 20 people in a small space and it's like, some of you don't shower often enough.
Yeah. Yeah, it's, I've seen it there. And, walked in when they were doing like Friday Night Magic, and Tanya and I go to this place in Kingston, Kingston Gamers Nexus, which like has a big space in the back, and like when there's a lot of people back there, even when you walk in the front door, it's like, oh yeah, this is mom's basement times 100 kind of thing.
This is Comic-Con in a jar.
Yeah. Honestly, I think that the type of people that would play D&D this way might skew a little bit more towards like the cosplayer D&D players and stuff like that more than the grognards. So, yes. I mean, you're going to get some of that. And I mean, D&D is for everyone. And I wouldn't try and turn anyone away or make this appeal to one versus the other or whatever. It's about bringing people together. But yeah, being outside might not be so bad,
Yep. It's interesting. We've done a tabletop sort of one-shot thing when we went camping one time. No dice. It was literally just storytelling where here's the situation. What do you do? Okay, here's the result of that. And here's what happens next. What do you do? And it was interesting because it worked out more like a discussion. Like there was much less, what ability am I going to use here? And much more of like, what am I trying to do and how would I try and get there?
Yeah.
Right. And you end up being a little bit more descriptive rather than, trying to leverage whatever particular rules there are. It's an interesting way to approach the game, I think. And I love the idea of destination D&D.
Yeah. Like, I think, it probably makes sense for us to like start on a smaller scale. Like I talked about the idea when Chris was playing with us that like we should go to Toronto and get hotel rooms and we can all chip in to fly him here. Probably not realistic now, but at the time it was like we would have our hotel rooms. We would play some D&D a couple times a day. We'd get up, we'd eat our faces off. We'd enjoy the pool and hot tubs or whatever. And then, and there would be something to us. And I know it's a little hard to say this because like your house is basically a cabin, not, it doesn't look like a cabin inside, but like, you've got a nice backyard and woods and, to ask you to come and be like, let's get a cabin is a little bit hard, but like realistically, you can rent those big cottages and cabins that like, it's got accommodations to sleep like 12 people if you want to.
Yeah.
And common rooms and stuff like that. That might be a good way for us to start to try out destination D&D. To me, I think the appeal is to get out in into the woods, into, interesting environments. But a couple of dry runs where you have like electricity and a way of an ambulance can show up there or something like that probably makes sense before you turn it into a huge thing.
There's a little bit of a thing too with depending on who you're trying to get to go anywhere about like what does the toilet look like?
Yeah.
Because I'm perfectly fine digging a hole in the ground. Like we've done camping like that and it's kind of fun. But at the same time, it's really nice to be able to take a shower.
It doesn't need to be like 10K into the woods kind of thing. Like that would be fun too. Like, a canoe and a portage. And like I've taken like training department stuff back in the day in the call center life on those types of trips when I was a little bit younger. And you have all of those challenges. Like by the end of the night, we were like boiling water through a sock to get something to drink because like there was beaver fever in the water that you couldn't drink the lake water. And anyway, there are campsites available that have like group campsites that are like you're not on top of the campers next door. There's space between you where you're at least isolated a little bit, and that's fine. Especially if they got trails that go out into the woods that you can go for a little bit of a hike and stuff too. What I don't want is, that camping where it's like, oh, I can see 7 other people that are in like motorhomes and trailers and, that kind of thing. And you got this idiot that's playing loud music like right next door and these fuckers that are going on about the bear, I love that camping trip that we had up in Grundy Lake, but that wasn't private, wasn't kind of what I'm thinking. So if we can find that sort of environment where at least you have the privacy. There's also a bunch of nerds getting together. You don't want everybody else kind of pointing at them and laughing, right? What are those?
Fair enough.
Is it a fucking cult? Like, what are those guys doing?
Yes, it is. There's some interesting things. Some of the sort of campgrounds along the northern side of Algonquin have smaller campground areas, and if you had like, I don't know, like if you had 4 or 5 groups of people coming in, you basically are the campground.
Yeah.
And there's also places, a couple of places. The one we went to the last time that we went, there's like 2 or 3 campsites out on a point, and it's just a paddle across the lake, and then you have like, I don't know, 20 acres to yourself.
Yeah.
So that kind of thing can work too. It's a great idea. I like it. I'd like to try it. I'm not willing to organize it, but I'm definitely on board to come.
All right. Something to think about. I think small scale, us friends, would be a good way to start. But like, I think what I like about the idea is the idea of turning it into like probably never make money with it. And that wouldn't be the motivation to do it. But
if you could break even.
Yeah. Definitely would have to break even. You could make money with it, just not, there's
money.
There's money where it pays for itself and you got a little bit left to promote the next event and stuff like that. And then there's like,
it would be the ideal amount of money to make is enough money that you don't have to pay to go.
Yeah.
And you get a case of beer out of it.
Yeah, exactly. Not going to be quitting my job to run Destination D&D, I'm sure. There might be places where that would be possible. I'm not the guy to run that kind of shit. I'm not a big name D&D YouTuber or something like that. I'm sure if a Genie D or somebody of that were to be like, I'm organizing Destination D&D and I have my own following of people that are always going to want to come to this. And you could probably make good money doing it that way. And, to be clear, like, it would be you have to pay, like, it isn't going to be, show up with, $20 or something like that. Like, to do it right, you need to make sure that everybody's
serious.
Everybody's serious, but everybody's got food and drinks. It's not like the land party situation for you bring your own shit, right? Like, I think it would be important to control things like food and beverages and stuff that are out there. People are going to bring their own coolers or whatever. That's fine. But what you don't want to be in a situation is where somebody shows up and there isn't food for them or there isn't drinks for them. Like, I think that needs to be part of it. So that's part of what people are paying for.
Yeah. You don't have to have an entire camping setup. You want to bring yourself some snacks in a package of hot dogs and a stick.
Yeah.
Bring your own bedding, basically.
Bring your shiny dice. We'll have tents for you. There'll be facilities for the washrooms and there will be first aid shit and food and drinks and a working cell phone in case of emergency, and probably transportation in and out of the place if necessary or whatever.
Yep.
There'd be a lot of logistics to figure out, like some of those things with camping. It's not like you can have 16 people all show up at that location with their own cars too. So it might be like organize a place where everybody arrives and then you have to do a shuttle in or something like that. But anyway, we'll start small with a group of like 6 or 8 people and go from there.
Yeah, I like the idea. I look forward to the invitation.
So while we did not run a game this past weekend, since the last time we recorded, we did have another session with our D&D group. Things happened.
They did. It's kind of funny because I think I might have mentioned this the last time we talked. Is like I went into a fever the day before we were playing the first time to prepare stuff and make sure I had maps and that I had read stuff and I had read ahead. And I thought, okay, oh God, I hope I have enough. And after 2 sessions, we are through sort of the first 2 of 5 encounters that I had actually read up on and prepared and made notes about the characters involved, the NPCs and the motivations and where they're going to be. I have a feeling that I probably have 6 or 8 potentially sessions actually like in the can, ready to go, which is a very strange position for me to be in. But the sort of plot is beginning to develop a little bit, I think. I'm not sure how much of it has been telegraphed and how much of it is like, I think this is obvious and it's just nobody's getting it. The characters are starting to interact with each other, which I think is really cool. Yeah, I mean, everybody seems to be sort of into their thing, which is good. The one thing I am missing, and I don't know, I have a feeling that you're absolutely not willing to do this anymore. You used to make notes and sort of write down a story at the end of every session. And while I'm not asking you to do that, I do want to sort of reiterate if you are playing a game and one of your players is willing to do that, even if it's just point form notes, it's really helpful to a DM to know what the players got, right? Because there's times as the DM where you're putting stuff out there and it's impossible to tell if your players are picking it up or if it's just too subtle.
Well, here's what I'll commit to you. I'll try.
Fair enough.
I think part of it is that there's you're adapting official material here, like sort of a canned module, I assume. I don't know how much of what we've seen is stuff that is as written, how much of it is stuff you've tweaked or something that you've made up entirely. I haven't run that myself or read that book, so it's nice kind of coming into it blind. But what there is there's a lot more detail. So I agree, like, with the other thing that we were running, I mean, there was stuff that was happening and, off the cuff stuff you might say here or there, but there wasn't a lot of detail. Any detail that we got felt relevant, and there wasn't the extraneous stuff. I think running sort of canned material, there will be more of that extraneous stuff that we'll just have to kind of remember, because maybe it isn't extraneous, maybe it feels that way now. And I agree, having some notes would probably be helpful. And now that everybody's kind of got their characters set, I think it would be easy for me to kind of step in and do that. So I will try.
It certainly doesn't need to be, because I mean, previously, especially during the Strahd stuff, I mean, you every week you would write like this story, and I'm like, this should just be novelized. Like it's a story from the perspective of your character, and I think that's probably a fair bit of work. And it's like this conversation that we have sort of after most sessions is also really helpful, where you say, this is what happened. I'm like, okay, good. I know what you got then.
So I have a couple of interesting takes on last session.
Okay.
I think most of it positive, but there's some interesting things that I haven't experienced so much from this perspective that I kind of want to call attention to them. Because usually it's me behind the screen doing this to other players or having other players doing this. And, one thing, and I think Tanya pointed this out after the session was, and we talked about it. We said, well, there was the complaint about, especially the last of the Rey Skywalker trilogy of movies, was there was like, we got to go here to learn where we got to go next, to learn where we got to go next, to learn where we got to go next. I mean, that entire session kind of worked out that way. I don't know if it was designed that way, because there's one interaction that sort of happened, which I want to be careful about how I'm saying this, because this isn't a criticism. I'm not criticizing any players. This is something that happens in D&D all the time. You have a player that's playing a character that has back channels to information, to story, to the DM, whatever. In this case, Cindy's playing a rogue character who's like, I'm going to go talk to some people. Totally normal for a rogue. So she didn't do anything wrong here. The way that played out in game for us was like, well, while she's going to do that, what do you guys want to do? All right, well, we'll go here. So we go there, or work our way to go there. And before we get there, she comes back and it's like, turn around, guys. You don't want to go there. Oh, okay. So where do we want to go? Let's go somewhere else. And then that led into, okay, well, we'll go here. We'll go to the bar in the morning. From there, we'll go to the warehousey thing, which was going to lead to a go somewhere else, except now we have something that's going on. The guards or whatever sort of getting ready to kick our teeth in. So being a player that's in the dark is sort of a new thing for me. You know, in the games that we've played with our group, we haven't had that sort of character that's consistently having back channel conversations with the DM that others aren't privy of.
Right.
And when I run my games, typically I'll do that in front of the other players. So it'll be up to the players to not metagame it and react as if they don't know information that they as players do know. But at least you're sort of involved in the information and the decisions that get made because of that information. And as a player in that game, there was that whole Cindy had a conversation. She wasn't revealing a lot to us in character at that time because we wanted to get to a safe place, which again, totally fine, totally in character, whatever. But it just created this sort of weird situation where like, okay, we're going to put together a plan. We're going to go somewhere. And then as we basically get to the door, we're told to turn around and go back. That's like, well, that was weird. That was kind of a big waste of time. Only to then, oh, it's morning now, so why don't we go there? We could have just gone there, whatever. It's rough and tumble or whatever. Would have been fine. So anyway, that played out just a little bit weird for me. Not bad, different, and sort of just a new experience from my perspective as a player, because I don't get to play much anymore, So nobody did anything wrong. Cindy didn't do anything wrong. You didn't do anything wrong. I found that a little bit jarring based on sort of what I'm accustomed to and how I'm used to either running games myself, or like we played 2 years of Strahd and stuff. And yeah, all of our characters had little secrets. I know that like Tanya had some stuff going on with Dulcimer, and it was never that level of like, it's not that we had a lot of other things to be doing. Right.
Right.
So
that's and it's a little bit of a challenge because it's kind of the thing that rogues, especially with the criminal background, have.
Sure.
Where it's like, I have secrets, right?
Yeah.
And part of the other thing is that like Waterdeep is such a big city that like it's more of a trying to build the atmosphere of like different areas of Waterdeep are different.
Yeah.
Right. Like here are places you don't want to go after dark. Like you guys would probably be fine, honestly. I mean, like you're a little bit overpowered for the stuff we're going through right now. But like just to give you the feeling of like, oh, you're not supposed to feel safe here at night.
Yeah,
right?
sure. And to put it in video games terms, like it's like walking into a zone that you're under leveled for, and this thing that essentially looks like a rat is kicking your ass because you're not ready for that shit yet. And that's totally fine, but we didn't get to find, it would have been different if we got to the bar and some thugs intercepted us on the street and got into a fight that, whether we won or not, took a round out of us and we weren't ready for what was next. The way it played out was, well, we made a big deal about getting there. Then the other person in the party came back and said, don't do that. We went back, slept, and then we went back there anyway. So it just mechanically in game felt a little bit weird. So whatever. I mean, it makes sense in the context of the game and the setting and the stuff that's going on. It just, as a player actually playing it like a game, was like, oh, that's different.
Yeah. No, it is a bit weird, and it's different for me as well. Sort of trying to put things together in a world that someone else built, right? Because even with Curse of Strahd, it's like, here's some things that are in the world, and it's fine. Build stuff around it. Like there's so much stuff and people in Faerun and Waterdeep that it's like.
And I wonder, like, I suspect that Cindy as a player is going to be somebody who enthusiastically embraces that part of her character. So, like, I'll look at how that gets played out in some actual plays. And it's up to you to decide whether you want to adapt this or not. A lot of that sidebar stuff happens in front of the other players at the character. There will be certain instances where there's, like, character-centric moments where, like, Matt Mercer or whomever is DMing the game will ask the other players to leave.
Yeah.
But that's not every time a player decides to, go and have a conversation with an NPC on their own somewhere. That is when there's important sort of character shit where that player may choose to keep secrets for reasons relevant to their character or whatever from the other characters and players at the table. Going and talking to, what was his name? Kevin? Is that the guy that I'm making fun of?
Yes.
I don't know because I wasn't there for what the exchanges that happened, but I'm going to assume the information that was exchanged wasn't of that nature. It was just...
No, and the reason that was exchanged offline was in an attempt to save time. It was like, okay, this is happening at the end of the episode. We're going to be apart for 2 weeks. I don't want to go through that conversation like at the beginning of next session where I'm going to be talking to Cindy and the rest of you just have to listen. Right. Especially because it was basically just a lore dump.
Sure.
Yeah. So mechanically, that's why it worked out that way.
Yeah.
And to be honest, like I didn't really give her a lot to work with. So I thought she did pretty good with what I gave her.
Oh, yeah. Again, this wasn't a criticism aimed at Cindy in particular. It was just something that happened because of the actions that she was taking, playing in character. So Cindy, if you're listening to this, I don't know how much you listen. You didn't do anything wrong. I'm not griping about you. You're all good. You're awesome. It was just sort of an interesting thing that happened at the table because of that sort of sidebar. I would think, like, if you're disseminating interesting lore, like, that now puts pressure on her to share that so that the rest of us can be in on it.
Yeah. I mean, it's lore that makes the most sense coming from her because it's basically just deep background stuff.
Yeah. Anyway,
none of it is news, just flavor. I'm curious how much of the sort of main plot that you've picked up yet.
Well, we know that there's something going on between Xanathar's group and the Zentarum. Zentarum, as far as we can tell, initially abducted. Oh God, I don't have my notes for the game open.
What's his face? Yeah,
what's this guy that looked like the other guy?
Yeah, Floon and the other guy who looks like him.
Initially abducted him, and then it appears that Xanathar's crew rolled in, took them out, and then took the other guy.
Floon. Yeah.
Now, we don't know what the motivation necessarily would be, except that Floon, being the son of important person, might know about the Sorry, not
Floon is the guy who...
Floon, who looks like the guy who was the son of they think he's the other guy and are thinking that he knows the location of
the Dragon Horde.
Yeah, it was an item to find it, though, right? It wasn't the location of the horde itself. I got it in my notes. I did take notes, so I got a little bit of a thing going on. Anyway, so I picked that up. So there's some interesting sort of meta stuff that I know as a person that I'm trying not to react to in game. For instance, like we walked into that. You went out of your way to call attention to the shop, the dude with all the purple shit. And in doing so, mentioned that he had basically like a stuffed beholder in the window. So I know who and what Xanathar is. Like my character doesn't. So I do. And I know that setup is probably significant. So in like as a player, I know because again, I haven't played this module, but I know enough. That guy's probably working for Xanathar, maybe. In some capacity, whether it's just, an eye on the streets or something like that. I don't know the details about it, but having a purple beholder in sort of your window has to, I mean, if I was a spy for somebody, I wouldn't sort of put the sigil of my patron or whatever on my window, but there's got to be something going on there because it was very deliberately set up. And the thing is so weird otherwise, right? Like, yeah, it's flavor or whatever, but, it was very much there's this shop and it's the only thing open. Don't walk away. You guys really want to go into this shop? Do we? I mean, we want to go to the bar. Yeah, but the shop's here. And look, there's purple haze, and it's just, and it was an interesting character and stuff like that. So I get it. I don't think that we as a group took that nudge, that meta nudge of like, here's something that's probably important. And we didn't run with it. Like we didn't really question the guy. We barely asked what his name was. We did our shopping. It's like, ooh, this is weird. I kind of leaned into character a little bit and just like, ooh, shiny. And then we left, right? Without really any more information other than, I think I saw some guys on the street. I think they went that way. But that was about all we got.
Yeah.
So I have a feeling we will learn more in the future about who that guy is, who he works for, or whatever. But maybe I'm reading into it too much. Maybe it's just a dude with a weird shop that, couldn't possibly make money in Waterdeep. And,
No, probably not.
Front for something.
It's entirely possible. I would like to say for anyone who is listening, Shane is the most fun to throw red herrings at because he follows them all.
Yeah. And, to be fair, like, I'm not saying that it's something. I'm saying that information was deliberately put there to make me think it could be something. But at the table, I'm the only person that meant anything to. I think maybe Rich probably recognized it for what it was too, but he didn't say anything either. I went out of my way not to act on that information because my character wouldn't. That's metagaming. But that doesn't stop me from speculating as a player. Like that's part of why you play, right? Ooh, this could happen. Ooh.
Yeah, here is a reference. I understood that reference.
Yeah.
I'm enjoying the reference. And even if it doesn't go anywhere, and it might not, it depends, right? I mean, it might come back later. It may not. Also, your characters would know not necessarily exactly who Xanathar is, but that Xanathar is a power in Waterdeep, right? His name comes up in the circles that you would travel.
But we probably wouldn't know that he's, a beholder and all of that other stuff. So
no, you know that he's basically like a criminal boss in the underworld.
Yeah.
And he's bad people.
So I think in terms of like the overarching story, that's probably all we've got. We know that there's money out there somewhere. We know that there's at least two factions that are probably trying to figure it out right now. One of them rolled over the other one, sort of in the early setup. Where that goes, I mean, I know again the Zentarum are sort of, they're not going anywhere, so they're probably they'll be back with something, and that dynamic will develop as we learn more. But I don't think we got too much more information besides that.
Not a ton. It's one of those funny things is that like the actual module itself is kind of lore dense.
Yeah.
But the 2 sessions that we played have been reasonably short. And just trying to sort of set up characters and where they fit in the world and what the city is like. And
yeah, and I think that's obviously important information to keep in mind. If I'm having any mild criticisms about like the vibe being weird or, you know, something maybe not being quite smooth mechanically or something being a little bit odd, it's the first couple of sessions. It is like exposition nation at this point, you know. It's going to be like that for a little while. You know, we don't have, other than, you know, Volo has promised to pay us to try and find this guy. Like, we don't have a stake in it yet as characters, you know. As we do, like, it's probably going to start smoothing out like the flow of information and all of those things. So expect some speed bumps and some sort of awkward delivery of exposition or whatever in the first few sessions, because that's how it always works. Even when it's official material.
yes, as we sort of feel our way into where we are and how we all fit.
Yeah, you know. I mean, getting arrested, if that's how it turns out, might be interesting.
Could be. It's unlikely to happen. But, I mean, it's possible. It really depends on
I don't know. I've been looking for a fight.
That would be interesting. I mean, that's, you know, leaning into character. This is one of those things where it's like, I used to prepare so much, right? And I used to like write out like dialogue and stuff. And now it's like, I don't know. Like the first time that Cindy played a rogue, she stabbed some guy in the face in the middle of the street because she failed to pick his pocket. Right. And it was like, okay, now what? I had 7 people around the table and the rogue got arrested. It was an interesting session.
Yeah.
We'll see how it works out. Like so far, I'm cautiously optimistic that this could be a lot of fun.
I'm really enjoying it. Like I'm already enjoying not only my character, but like our group's characters a lot more than the last mini thing that we were doing.
Well, you got to make this one.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of it. Funny enough, when you created the characters and sort of created archetypes for everybody, you know, you had it like you were like, hey, let's recreate the crew of Serenity, right? Like you're like, these are the archetypes. Like I'm talking about Firefly here, you know. You're the Malcolm Reynolds character, you're the Jean character, you're the, you know. I think we're falling into that more by accident with these characters that we've created. Now that we have the right people playing the right characters, maybe. You could look at my character and say, okay, that's Jane-esque. I'm going to get some, at least I hope so. Rich's character is a little bit harder to read at this point, but like if it leans into like a shepherd bookish kind of thing, like, you know, you are a person with like religious background, but you're like out here for some reason, you know, beyond preaching religiosity to the locals. Like, so that's interesting. Cindy's character doesn't quite fit into the Firefly mold as of yet.
Not really.
Not serious enough to be Zoe, but
not silly enough to be what's her name? Haley?
Kaylee.
Yeah. That's her name.
Yeah. And then Tanya's character, I don't know, somewhere between a wash and something. We'll see how that one plays out. If you cram Simon and Wash together, you kind of end up with the way she's been playing that character so far. But
I wonder if Cindy's character wouldn't be most analogous with Anara.
Yeah.
Right? Got contacts that's outside of the group, sort of, you know, with the group, but doing stuff that's sort of secret. You can cram it into whatever.
Yeah, Firefly was built off of tropes and stereotypes and storytelling devices and character archetypes that have existed forever. Part of the reason that it was so good was because of that stuff. Like, never bad to lean into the tropes for things like this, you know? I just find it funny that, like, you intentionally said you guys are basically the crew of the Firefly with these characters, and it didn't work out that way at all. And everybody kind of played it a little bit flat. And then we re-rolled in a slightly different environment. We did the preparation up front, like, hey, what kind of group do we want to be? What kind of game do we want to play? And then we ended up finding characters that, fit that mold anyway, but we're invested in them a little bit more, I guess. I don't know. I'm enjoying that aspect of it. I'm enjoying the interplay. I'm not looking to take credit. My characters that I've played historically in our campaigns has never been the glue character. And right now I'm enjoying being able to, in character, at least be the guy that gets the other people talking. I'm doing a lot of talking, and I like hearing myself talk. I have a podcast. Maybe you've heard of it.
Just one?
In our Curse of Strahd campaign, aside from the buddy cop stuff between Dulcimer and Squigs, till one of them got themselves killed.
Well, both of them got one of them killed.
Yes. But after that, I was doing a lot of talking, but I was the only one that was doing the talking. And every time I would do the talking, it was often because I felt like somebody needed to talk. Somebody needed to plan or ask questions or whatever. And playing the character that I'm playing, again, sort of somewhere between like a Grog from Vox Machina. Not necessarily the dumb character, but just the simpler character that can engage in weird conversation. Have these side personal relationships with the other characters that, they don't mean anything, but they're there and I can lean on it. This is fine. I'm enjoying that role so far. 10 sessions from now, we'll see if I run out of steam or the players run out of steam with me doing that,
I mean, it could happen. There's always the option too of, bringing in the B characters. So
Vox Machina season 3 just released last week. I guess 4, 5, and 6 episodes are out today. I haven't watched them yet. There's one line that I love the dynamic between sort of the Grog and Pike character. I didn't watch campaign 1 much, but I have watched the animated show stuff, and maybe the dynamic was a little bit different. But I like that dynamic that they've created in the animated stuff. And I'm kind of pushing to have that dynamic with my character. But there was the one scene where Grog said something about blah, 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 blah. Well, I've been thinking, real hard about something. And then Pike says something along the lines of, well, what did you come up with? And he said, nothing. I just wanted you to know that I was thinking. It's just like, oh, that's so perfect.
That is a great line. And that is such a Grog line too.
Yeah.
That cast has come up with some great lines. There's that one, and there's one that I think Taliesin came up with, where someone said something to him, blah blah blah, but you have to keep it to yourself. And he looked at them and said, "Your secret is safe with my indifference."
Yeah. So I guess we'll briefly talk about my game, provide my usual update, and that's that there isn't much of one. We're getting so close to kind of the Avengers 1 climax kind of thing, right? And we lost a player. I intentionally chose not to fill that seat until after we kind of got through this climax, because it would be awkward to shoehorn another player in, show up for the final fight kind of thing. Might take a little while as we work up to it, but you're not going to have a lot of character investment in this, and then we'll deal with it afterwards. So I wanted to try and get through it with the remaining players that I have before filling some seats. And it's just not working out from like attendance perspective. And it's, again, the time of year. It's happened with our group too, where we're having a real hard time stringing some games together. I tried, I liked when I was running 4, I could get away with running 3, like a player short. And some of our best sessions happen that way, honestly. I've tried running sessions with 2 players, running a player short now. And
it's tough.
It's been not great, and I'm not pointing a finger at any one person in particular there. It isn't enough. Every time it's happened, one player has walked away kind of dissatisfied with how the session went. As DM, I've never been completely satisfied with how it's gone. And you're trying not to like move the main plot forward too much with those because you're a player short and you want to, especially where we are right now, right? Like we're just about to get into it. And anyway, so I talked to my players this week because again, we were going to be player short this week. So it's been one session in 5 weeks, I think, or 4 weeks that we've run.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Which for this group has been odd, right? Like we were faithfully running every week. We took a break at Christmas, but we weren't even doing summer hiatus. And now it's getting tougher and tougher. And, the players have stuff going on, personal stuff, life stuff. So I get it, trying to get a group of adults to align their schedules on playing D&D regularly is tough. And I've been spoiled. But anyway, I said to my players, look, we'll postpone this week because one of them wasn't going to be there. I'm not going to try and run with two. We'll aim to get back together next week. But, there's a trend that's happening here. Maybe it's just a blip. If we can string some games together, don't worry about anything. But if we can't get some traction back, we might want to look at either maybe a hiatus until the new year, just because, this is going to be the tough part of the year anyway. Let people deal with some of the stuff that they've got going on, or maybe parachuting at least one new player in, maybe two, before I really wanted to do it, in which case I might have to, make some adjustments to try and make that work a little bit better, just so we can consistently get games going.
Yeah.
I've found myself more frustrated by the situation than I thought I would be. Like, we've always very much had the, it's a game kind of attitude, and real life comes first. And, hey, I've been my family between Tanya and I has been the focal point of real life having to come first quite a few times as it affects our group. And there's been a few instances as a DM, in the past few years where I've had to say, look, I can't, or we would have a backup day that, I can't make the backup day work if, a player's going to be away on the main day. So it's all of us, but
I'm sorry. I'm apparently going to have to pause for some sort of emergency announcement. You'll have to edit this bit out, I think. Sorry to interrupt.
No, it's all good. I just wanted to say that, I've spent a lot of time since we've started this podcast bragging about how amazingly smooth and uncharacteristically regular my campaign and games and players have been. And I'm now experiencing the challenges that most adults trying to organize games with other adults face. And because I lost a player, that the impact of that has been amplified. And I found it more frustrating than I thought I would. I've caught myself. I don't know if my players listen to this podcast. I love you guys. I'm over it. But I've been annoyed, like tangibly annoyed. And it's like, at one point in time, I caught myself saying, what the fuck am I even doing this for? Which isn't healthy. It's not a great spot.
No, but it's difficult not to be frustrated by that situation, no matter which part you're in. There have been times where I've been a player in a game and it's been, the DM cancels and I'm like, man, I was really looking forward to playing. And same the other way.
This week was just a quick call off, but last week we had a situation. This is where I got frustrated. It was one of the players approached me well before the game day. It was 4 or 5 days in advance. Doing a great thing, proactive. It's I can't make it our normal day or our backup day. I just wanted to let you know. She basically has a job that occasionally she has to go into court.
Oh, yeah. Right? You don't get to avoid that.
Right. And has to prepare for whatever it is that she does. So she'll be I need all of that day or night before or whatever to prepare. And then I'm going to be in court all day. So I don't know when I'm going to be coming out. And I'm not going to be in any position to be playing that night. So it's okay, you gave me like 4 days notice. I can work with that. So I go to the players, and I'm not singling any players out when I do it. I just said, hey, some of you guys have reached out and told me that our usual day and backup day aren't going to work this week. We can either postpone for the week, or we can shuffle things around and try a different day, because it's been a while since we've strung a lot of games together. I'm willing to try and fit something in on the Friday or on the weekend or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And the other players were like, yep, I can make that work. The other one's like, actually, I have this other thing going on that night, but I can rearrange it. I'm like, well, don't go to any trouble. And they're like, no, it's no big deal. So they shuffled so that the night that we were proposing, they would be open. I think it was actually another D&D game that they were running that they'd moved or something, but it was just for like friends.
Right.
And then we get to the day that we'd all agreed this is the sort of
the backup day.
And like an hour before the session, the other player that didn't have to change their plans bailed. I was just like,
Yep.
You know,
life happens.
Hey, yeah, it absolutely happens. And again, when I said like I was annoyed and frustrated, I caught myself. Like, you don't have any right to be annoyed or frustrated by this, but it was the first time that my reaction had been that sort of like visceral disappointment, you know? And then I caught myself. I'm like, dude, whatever. It's just a game. You got to remind yourself it's just a game.
Mm-hmm. You can't help how you feel, but I mean, catching it afterwards and going, okay, like the reaction needs to be more moderate.
Yeah.
I mean,
but it was the first time that I've had to catch myself that way, which sort of, it's a sign of where I'm at with it. And both that I've been incredibly spoiled up until this point, and that more recently it's been quite difficult to, you know, and I'm excited to like, you know, we're at a spot in the campaign where it's like, we're coming up to the climax. I've had this shit rolling around in my head. I've been bouncing, you know, like this is all crafted around your characters. I can't wait for you guys to see it. You're going to love it. Eventually.
Yeah, we'll get to it someday.
Yeah. So anyway.
But that's life gaming with adults, man. I mean, it was great when we were all in high school and we'd get together on a Sunday afternoon and play until 4 a.m. But I don't know about you, but I can't do that anymore.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, before you get to your Northern Lights, I do have a quick parting gift for everyone.
And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Anybody want a peanut?
Been watching this channel for a little while. I probably should have called it out before. On YouTube, it's called Zach Builds, and falls into the sort of maker space, woodworker, 3D printing, nerd kind of stuff. I watch a lot of channels like this. I think the most popular example that I think a lot of people know is DIY Perks. The thing with DIY Perks is like their stuff is so like such a high bar in terms of production quality and like final result, execution, ideas, just, you know, is brilliant, but intimidating. Like I watch DIY Perks and I'm never, I could do that. You know, I'm like, I could try to do that, but I wouldn't do it as well.
Nailed it.
Yeah, where Zach Builds, it's like the more approachable version of that, because like I can look at what he's doing and say, oh, he could have done that better. And then at the end of it, like he'll say, these are the things that I probably would do better next time. You know, these are the challenges that I faced or the things that I screw up. And he doesn't aim for something that's flawless and perfect, you know, but the production quality and execution is high enough to still keep me interested. I got into him. He was doing like modernization modding for like older consoles. So everything from NES, Super Nintendo, PlayStation, Sega, Saturn, stuff like that. Building new cases for them. He would do things like USB-C power mods for them, so you're not having to use the old shitty power stuff. HDMI modding stuff so that you're not outputting over like RF and stuff like that. He's done a lot of like emulator projects that I got into, but he also does stuff like furniture making, like making an end table for nerds, right? So, you know, it's got built-in wireless charging for the cell phones and LED lighting and You know, very, very sort of like this building stuff specific for him. And it's quite enjoyable. Most recently, he did a series making his own speakers. So like not just, you know, slapping speakers in a box, but being selective about the materials and designing chambers for appropriate dimensions and materials based on like science, right? And sort of walks you through that without overwhelming you with the information. And anyway, interesting. Zach Builds, check him out on YouTube. You know, he's popular enough, probably 500,000 followers, but could always use a couple more for those of you watching.
We might actually be able to send him like approximately 20.
Yeah. Anyway, unless you've got something you want to share, that's it for me.
I did have something, but unfortunately it's in the part of my brain that's been put to sleep by alcohol.
I just finished off this pants.
And there go your pants.
Yeah. Well, it's been good talking to you, man.
And you as well. I'm going to go out and watch the Northern Lights with my wife. I won't be back for 10 minutes.
All right, man. Cheers.
All right. Talk to you later.
I know I've said the joke about 9 times, but I wasn't wearing pants to begin with.
This is a pants optional podcast.
That's my secret, Cap.